Perpetual Life. I want to say hello to you as well as everyone online. We are live streaming here, and we have a good friend, Ken, hopefully joining us, as well as many others around the world. My name is Neil Vandry, and I will be your officiator. And we've got a lot of action tonight, so we're going to get going right away. So here we go. Buckle up. Here at the Church of Perpetual Life, we espouse the ideology of our prophet, Nikolai Fedorovich Fedorov, who's a Russian prophet and philosopher. And he basically said we should divert human energies from wars and dissensions toward measures of protecting mankind against natural disasters like earthquakes and floods, instead of having wars, finding cures for diseases like aging. Here at COPL, the Church of Perpetual Life, we do not endorse any candidate, any political party, any political position. The Church of Perpetual Life does not endorse any product, service, or statements made by any guests, speakers. We may or may not agree with the guest speakers. We have an open forum here for discussion. We're searching for the reversing of aging. We're searching for a long, extended lifespan, perhaps unlimited. So we want to hear everyone's opinion, but that does not mean that we necessarily agree with those opinions. I may say that again tonight. It's a very important issue for us here. But before I do, let's go ahead and get this thing going. So the important thing that you need to know, we have 3 speakers tonight, and we have first coming up is going to be a couple of young lady scientists, and I'll be introducing you in just a moment, and then will be Zoltan. I don't know if you followed our websites. And also, when you checked in, when you got your name badges, when you registered, how many people gave their email address or checked in with your names there? All right, that's wonderful. If you haven't done that, please do so. We keep them confidential, and we just want to keep in touch with you. Let's bring up our first speaker this evening. Polly is a research scientist. She's graduated from the Genetics Department of Moscow State University. She is heading a project evaluating aging biomarkers and searching for possible interventions for skin aging. She runs a beauty blog, agingbio.com. Speech title tonight is Classifying Aging as a Disease. Let's welcome our good friend, Polly.
Thank you very much. It's a great honor for me to be here. Let me introduce myself. I'm trained as a geneticist, and I work for In Silico Medicine, a bioinformatician company based in Johns Hopkins University. I'm primarily focused on skin aging research, but today I'm going to speak about classifying aging as a disease. So, I know that history sometimes might be boring, but let me focus your attention on some of my important dates in long history of disease classification. So it has to be said that professional disease classification appears in the 15th century in Italy, but thanks to England, it made it international, and it followed by 47 nomenclature of disease by the American Medical Association. But real progress was made when classification became international. So the first classification of the disease appears in 1900. It was made by Institute of Statistical Health, and it was called ECD-1. And then in 1948, World Organization of Health decided to print and publish all classification of the disease. But before that, it was not so periodically. So the criteria of disease historically has changed. And interesting that before 1948, physical disorders were not classified as a disease at all. And another extreme example that before 1974, homosexuality was classified as a disease. So, ECD is an international classification of the disease. It has been translated for 43 languages, and most of the countries use the system to classify disease. It is important to produce the drugs, to produce care, to establish payment for the disease, and tracking public health also. So this is why it's important to classify aging disease, to establish these systems, to gain their payment system, to produce new drugs, new therapies to reverse aging. Recent studies show that aging and complex disease share signatures on gene expression level, but transition from age-related process and disease is still not clear. And we want to classify these processes also as a disease, but it's complex because we need to establish biomarkers, proper biomarkers of really healthy person. So we need to decide what is real health is. We need to set up the gold standard of health to switch the criteria of health. So aging is not natural. Believe me, it's not natural at all. And during aging, our body, our cells gain a lot of damages. Our immune system decline, and actually we lose their regeneration capacity. But all of this process has to be treated with the vitamins and supplements for now. As age-related pathologies and disease has to be treated with the real drugs. So we need to change this said. Current classification is ICD-10, and right now, actually, age-related physical disability classified as a disease, it has code R54, as pain has code R52. But these R codes mean that this is condition, is not a disease, and couldn't be treated as a disease. So if you have pain, you just have pain, you don't get the proper medical intervention. So while obesity already classified as a disease, it has E code, it means that it could be and should be treated with the proper medical intervention. So our upcoming event is ACDC11, and it's going to be released in 2018. So it's really important before this date to classify aging disease, because next classification, next release will be approximately in 2050, so even for my generation, it's too late. The good news is that life expectancy is growing, but the bad news is that healthy life expectancy doesn't grow so fast. It means that for every 7 years of life expectancy gained, 2 of these will be unhealthy years. It means that we will be longer life, but not healthy life. If you have a cancer, instead of 3 months, you will live for 2 years, but it's not healthy years, and you still die of cancer. So the problem really starts of how our government and companies focus on their treatment. They focus on to prolong life of terminal ill patients, and it's really, really, really expensive to do this type of therapies. And families are not able to pay for this. Insurance is not cover all the price. So, but it's easy to conduct the studies on such treatments. It's easy to get the results, while proving that preventive treatment is maybe take decades. So we already know some geroprotective drugs. It's metformin, rapamycin, resveratrol, ibuprofen, aspirin, so some of them we are taking them, but this geroprotective drug will mimic young states, will reverse or slow down aging. So cancer expectancy right with age, it's age-related pathologies, and recent studies show the links between aging and cancer, because during aging our DNA accumulate damages, and when cell get damages in DNA in cell structure, he had two choices: to die or to escape death and become cancer cell. So autophagy is a normal way to escape cancer state for the body, but as all biological process is not ideal, it's imperfect, so it not happen all the time. Aging is a risk factor for all age-related disease. Aging treatment is a preventive treatment for all aging disease, so as Alzheimer, cardiovascular disease, and for all this type of age-related pathologies, we don't have a proper treatment, not effective enough. For some of them, we don't have treatment at all. So if you have this disease, you will die of this disease with no proper treatment. So it is important to have a prevention instead of treatment. So please raise your hand who is taking metformin now. Yeah, I'm taking metformin for 3 months by myself. I hope it will help me. So I have a great news that thanks for Albert Einstein Medical College that initiate and sponsor clinical trials for metformin. So if they approve these trials, currently these trials on phase 4, this means that the drug is already on market, but FDA need to find out will be another risk or to find out safety and efficacy of the drug. It's a double-blind study. That means that both volunteers and the investigator don't know what volunteers are taking. It's a placebo or metformin. And they're conducted on 60 years old and older, healthy elderly patients, both females and males. So, do we have hope? Yes, sure we have. Thank for Life Extension Foundation, for Sense Research Foundation, Google, Calico, and Silica Medicine, even big pharma as Novartis are also supporting aging research. Despite the fact that most pharmaceutical companies are trying to mask aging research under research of neurological disease as Alzheimer or cognitive dysfunction, during Bell-Life Swing, chairman of Novartis, Jane Rockhart, stated that for now, for pharma, for Novartis, their main focus is aging. So Novartis already conducted some studies on healthy elderly patients. They give them a rapamycin and a placebo drug. They divide it in a group of 2, and then they vaccinate with the flu vaccine to examine how they will live after their vaccination. So it seems that after taking rapamycin, people resist flu really better than without rapamycin. Also, some gerontologists launch a Journal of Self-Experimentation. It's going to be in December 2050. This, like all of you know, that famous scientist Elizabeth Parrish conducted a very brave experiment on herself. She prolonged her telomere with a viral vector. So, but one person for the experiment is not representative enough. We need to have more scientists. And actually, I know a lot of people that conduct experiments on themselves, as I do. So the Journal of Self-Experimentation will allow these scientists to publish their results, to share the result between other experimenters, also to upload their results and test system will validate them and anonymize them automatically. So what we should do to make World Health Organization to classify aging as a disease? First, we need to create a task force, as it was done for pain. So most likely, pain will be classified as a disease in an upcoming event, ACDC-11. Also, we need to set up a clear definition of normal state, to set up a norm, to find out what is real norm, what is real health, because all the biological markers of aging are differential. That means we need to compare age or disease state with healthy or norm state. We need to set up effective metrics for all the drugs that we already have and therapies that will prevent or slow down aging. So one of the possible metrics is the quality-adjusted life years. One quality-adjusted life years mean 1 year in perfect health. If you're dead, you have 0 score. And sometimes, in some circumstances, you have a negative score if it's like state, worse than death. So another metric is a healthy years equivalent. The concrete number of years lived in perfect health compared to the precise number of years spent in perfect health. All the therapies should be evaluated using these metrics. And also we need to join together, and I want to cite the world's most inspiring woman in science in gerontology, Maria Konovalenko. Aging is a curable disease, so let's cure it. What have we already done? In October, some gerontologists initiate the talk about aging and health aging, but for now they don't discuss that we need to classify aging as disease. So we really need to do this before 2050. Thank you for your attention.
Well, Polly, I think that was beautiful, and I certainly hope that we get to hear more of this. Her partner, or an additional scientist, is Jane, and she got her bachelor's degree in bioengineering and now is studying the possibilities to utilize human hair follicles as a research tool in gerontology. She also has a blog, agingkills.com, and her title of her speech this evening, her talk will be Artificial Intelligence in Aging Research. Let's welcome Jane. And by the way, before we do this, I'm not telling you their last names. It's on our website. I can't pronounce them. We decided to go with just first names, Polly and Jane, okay? Let's welcome Jane to Hollywood.
Hello, everybody. My name is Jane Schastnaya. I'm a junior scientist at In Silico Medicine. Our company is utilizing advances in genomics and big data analysis for in silico drug discovery for aging and age-related diseases. But today I'm going to give a speech on artificial intelligence and its application to aging research. It is obvious that people have always wanted to live longer and healthier lives, but only in the 20th century, life expectancies in major developed countries doubled and continue to increase. Exponential advances in technology transformed every aspect of our daily life. And now we're at the point of human evolution where our understanding of human biology can help us to develop personalized therapeutic interventions, discover new drugs, or reposition to the old ones to slow down or even stop aging. And to stop aging, we have to overcome two barriers, but they are very, very strong. The first one is our perception of aging. We know that aging is a curable disease, and we need to do our best to classify aging as a disease. And the second barrier is the current state of medical care system. Healthcare is in trouble because of the large amount of data that is being generated. It is estimated that by 2020s, doctors will face 200 times more data than a human can possibly process. So a big part of the generated data is in unstructured data, and unstructured data demands cognitive technologies and new approaches. So we need to create a machine that can analyze the data, to summarize and propose solutions for our problems. So basically we need to create a machine with human abilities, artificial intelligence. And several aspects of life provided important clues for intelligence, as it is the brain that is responsible for converting sensory information into action. Maybe some important ideas may be found in works of neurophysiologists and neuroanatomists, and also some scientists are trying to find some clues in evolutionary processes, but I won't talk about them today. In the late 19th and early 20th century, the neuron doctrine specified that living cells called neurons, together with their interconnections, were fundamental to what the brain does. Our brain has about 10 billion neurons. Although they come in different forms, typically they consist of a cell body or soma, dendrites, and one or maybe more axons. And axon has a connection with the dendrites of the other neurons, so they form what's called a synapse. Basically, the neuron doctrine claims that the various activities of the brain, including perception and thinking, are the result of all this neural activity. And in the 1943, the American neurophysiologist Warren McCulloch and logician Walter Pitts claimed that the neuron was a logic unit. In a famous and important paper, they proposed simple models of neurons and showed that networks of these models could perform all possible computational operations. The McCulloch-Pitts neuron was a mathematical abstraction with inputs and outputs corresponding to dendrites and axons respectively. In 1957, Frank Rosenblatt began work on a neural network under a project called PARA, Perceiving and Recognizing Automaton. He was motivated by the earlier works of McCulloch and Pitts, and he designed networks that he called perceptrons. They were like potential models of human learning, cognition, and memory. Rosenblatt perceptions consisted of McCulloch's elements, and they had inputs and weights and some output. The inputs were either ones or zeros. They were multiplied by their weights. Then their sum was identified, and if it passes the certain threshold, the output would be 1 or 0 if it doesn't pass the threshold. So among all the intriguing possibilities of the work of neural networks, unsupervised learning may be a very precious, because unsupervised learning is a collection of techniques for the construction of useful classification based just on data itself. So suppose we have unlabeled sample points that seem to be aggregated into clusters, and can we learn anything from just these data? It seems that points that are belong to a certain cluster, that they somehow connected, and if we could automatically process data samples to identify clusters and the boundaries between them, we would have a method of unsupervised learning. So instead of writing a program that is based on our perception of the data, data scientists are now writing programs that learn how to solve the problem. As we now have automated data gathering techniques and quite cheap mass storage devices, it is possible to generate huge amounts of data. But the great volume of raw data calls for efficient data mining techniques for classifying, quantifying, and extracting useful information. Machine learning techniques are playing a very important role in data analysis because they can deal with massive amounts of data. In fact, the more data, the better. However, this is a picture that illustrates that conventional machine learning techniques were limited in their ability to process natural data in their raw form. So a new area of machine learning, deep learning, that can overcome these difficulties has been introduced in an objective to move machine learning closer to artificial intelligence. Deep learning is an algorithm inspired by how the human brain works, so theoretically it has no limits. Deep learning are basically a set of algorithms that try to automatically learn multiple level of representation or abstraction that helps make sense from data. And some of the most successful deep learning techniques involve neural networks that I've shown previously. Deep learning and the main concept of deep learning is automating the extraction of representation or abstractions from the data. Deep learning algorithms use a huge amount of unsupervised data to automatically extract complex representation. Abstract representations are usually constructed based on less abstract ones, and they are very, very useful because they're invariant to small changes in the input data. Deep learning algorithms create deeper and deeper abstractions from the data. Like in this picture, you can see that the first layers identify some features, and the last one in the neural networks can say that the woman in the picture is Sarah. And nowadays, apart from recognizing your face on Facebook and typing text with your voice, deep learning helps us to solve many difficult problems. It has beaten other machine learning techniques at predicting the activity of potential drug molecules and other hard biomedical problems. And we'll now take a look at several biomedical cases where deep learning seems to show very, very promising results. And the first one I'd like to point out is image recognition. The accumulation of X-rays, CT scans, and MRIs means that doctors face an enormous task of sifting through this medical data in order to reach diagnoses. But now, thanks to advances in deep learning, this task is becoming much easier. Actually, a group of scientists at analytics company, they fed their deep learning algorithm with long CT scans, and their algorithm was even better than professional radiologists, but the goal is not to replace doctors, just to help them to make their diagnosis better and faster, because it is very, very important for the patient. And it leads to better outcomes because if you detect cancer early, your probability of survival is like 10 times greater. Another option is drug discovery. In 2012, a group of scientists won the Merck Molecular Activity Challenge, where they used their deep learned algorithm to identify therapeutic targets for drugs. And actually, this team consisted only of data scientists. There were no biologists among them, and they did no feature engineering and only minimal pre-processing of the data, so their algorithm was very successful. Everybody was fascinated. Also, you can find about 10 scientific papers about this topic on PubMed. Another application may seem like fun, but actually it's not. The application is going to come at app stores and other sources for detecting your wrinkles. You just have to use a frontal camera, make photos of yourself every day, and the app will detect the dynamics of your wrinkles. You have to choose the treatment that you are using, and this app is important not only to validate the cream that you are using, but also to create feedback for cosmetics company, because it has never been done on the massive scale, and the feedback is very important in this area of research. And the most promising one is using deep learned algorithms for identifying aging biomarkers in blood, because blood is a very, very easily accessible liquid. So instead of performing an unneeded biopsy, you can just, the doctors can just take a sample of your blood and they can detect a range of diseases based on just on this liquid. So it's much easier to do than to perform a biopsy, for example. And the next one is our company's success. I don't know how to turn this on, actually. Okay. I don't know how to do it. So the idea is that we made a deep learned neural network for identifying biomarkers of aging and skin. You just have to, if you're a biologist, you just have to search for publicly available data set, put its number in our program, and the program will tell you the age of the patient, and the prediction accuracy is about 86%, which is absolutely fascinating. And if you want to keep up with the latest updates on this topic, you have to search for a scientific journal called Artificial Intelligence in Medicine. It publishes articles from a wide variety of interdisciplinary perspectives concerning application and practice of artificial intelligence in medicine, human biology, and healthcare. So thank you very much for your attention. Please don't hesitate to write me via email if you have any questions. Thank you very much.
How lucky are we that we have not only one but two excellent science medical researchers here with us tonight. Again, a hand for Polly and Jane. And again, I do want to reiterate that the Church of Perpetual Life does not endorse any candidate, political party, or political position. We don't endorse any product, service, or statement, and all the statements made by any guest speakers may or may not reflect the ideas and opinions of the Church of Perpetual Life. Our next guest speaker has arrived with the famous Immortality Bus you may have seen parked in the parking lot as you came to the church. The Immortality Bus came from San Francisco and has been making its way all around the country. Zoltan Istvan is an American writer, futurist, philosopher, and transhumanist. He writes transhumanist-themed columns, the Transhumanist Philosopher, a blog for Psychology Today, and Transhumanist Future for Vice's Motherboard. He has also worked as a reporter for the National Geographic Channel and is a blogger of futurists, transhumanist topics for the Huffington Post. He's the author of the Transhumanist Wager, a philosophical science fiction novel. Ladies and gentlemen, let's give a warm welcome to our good friend Zoltan Istvan.
Thank you, Neil. Thanks so much for having me. All right, Neil, real quickly, I didn't look at the clicker yet. It's just that way? Yeah, I'm not sure. Yeah, great. Got it. I'll figure it out. Hello, everyone. Just figuring out the clicker for my slideshow. Well, thank you for coming tonight. And as Neil had mentioned, if you haven't seen already, there is a very wacky-looking bus that is looks very similar to a coffin. I hear that it's lit up, and we've had some incredible opportunities over the last, actually about 9 or 10 weeks now, traveling across the country. We've done 5 stages and just finished it. We are. This is the end of the 5th stage tonight. I've had a number of different people traveling with me on that bus. Probably 20 or 30, including a number of journalists, and we've had a couple documentaries, and so it's been an incredible opportunity. But tonight I'm actually not going to be speaking about the bus because this is an excellent opportunity to speak in general just about transhumanism. And if you're not familiar with transhumanism, I'm going to absolutely get into it, but because the Church of Perpetual Life emphasizes, we're having some feedback. Because the Church of Perpetual Life emphasizes life extension science, this is an excellent opportunity to actually talk about some of the other types of technologies that are involved with not only life extension, but also transhumanism. But I like to start almost all my speeches with a very simple thing, because while in this crowd, you're probably not too freaked out about living indefinitely. A lot of places that I do speak, we were in Alabama, for example, yesterday, and we've been in Mississippi, and we've been in Texas. When you speak about indefinite lifespans or 1,000-year lifespans, people can get pretty wigged out, especially if there's some type of conservative attitude to it. But I like to always point out to them that the the universe is almost 14 billion years old. And so as a species, being about a million years old, we are just getting started. So at least mammals being about a million years old. So when you hear some of the stuff that we're going to be talking about, especially near the end, bear in mind that artificial intelligence, mind uploading, all these different things, they're just things that are part of evolution and part of ourselves at some point here in the near future. But a lot of people, don't necessarily know exactly what transhumanism means, but it's an umbrella term for talking about technologies and science that essentially will radically modify the human being and modify the human experience. For those who don't know, there's 1, 2, probably nearing 3 million, in my opinion. Stats vary. People around the world who would say, hey, I'm a transhumanist. I'm sure many people in this room would say it. And it's this term of saying, hey, I actually believe in radical science to change my body and change my experience. And it's a growing movement. One of the main reasons it grew, strangely enough, is because of Dan Brown's novel, The Inferno, which sold about 12, 13 million copies. And for those of you who don't know, there is a Hollywood blockbuster movie coming out at the end of summer. So you can expect a big push for transhumanism to emerge. But it is a concept that media is increasingly using as a way to describe everything that we've been talking about tonight in an umbrella term. We are living longer, we are living better, and lots of crazy things are going to be happening to the body. But most importantly, and I think what fascinates people most, is that we're going to be conquering death. And that is, in my opinion, the number one goal of all the work that I try to do. It's the number one goal of the bus. It's the reason the bus looks like a coffin. We're trying to have a provocative gesture, tell people that, especially places like Alabama and Mississippi, that we can conquer death through science. This is a feasible goal. In the next 10, 20, 30 years, especially if we put enough resources into it, we can conquer death. And it sounds radical to many people, but I'm a firm believer that's going to happen. And you've just seen some of the science about it. In my own case, because my father has had 4 heart attacks, is barely alive, and I have heart disease running in my family. Heart disease has been one of the things I've really focused on. And if you don't know, in France, they've just done the second robotic heart transplant. And I'm a believer that within 10 or 15 years, people will have robotic hearts, and they will get them electively. It's not that they're going to have a bad heart and get them. It's that they may have a robotic heart just because they want one. For example, if you have a robotic heart, you might be able to run a marathon when you normally wouldn't be. If you have a robotic heart with your iPhone, you can turn down the robotic heart so you can sleep better, or you can meditate. If you want to have crazy sex, you can boost it up. So there's a lot of reasons why you would want robotic hearts and robotic organs, because you can boost your performance as a human being. And organ failure is the number one reason people die. So getting robotics into organs is something that I'm very passionate about. So, even 10 years ago when we talked about disability, it was still like, oh, that person is blind or that person is deaf. Well, in 10 years from now, we're not going to speak about it like that. In fact, in speaking of deafness, nobody speaks about deafness anymore as being something that can't be changed. We have cochlear implants. About almost 400,000 people actually around the world now have a cochlear implant that allows them to hear even if they were born deaf. And the Argus 2, which you're looking at here, allows blind people to see vague images. Now, it's not perfect yet, but it's getting better every year. And in fact, there are 6 major companies out there that are working on the robotic eye. Most experts think by 2027, some people will start electively replacing one eye. And I can already tell you, the people that are wearing this, the blind people, they have better telescopic vision than any single person in this room. So we are already getting to a point of transhuman vision. We're going to systematically eliminate every single disability on the planet with technology, and I'm a big proponent of it. Many of you have heard of cryonics. I'm kind of going through some of the classic transhumanism fields before I get into kind of the meat of some of the things I go around in my tour and talking about. But all of you know that cryonics, probably in this room, where we freeze dead people in hopes to bring them back. In fact, we don't call them dead people because we consider cryonics emergency medicine, the final stage. And if you're not unaware, those small tanks are where the heads go, and the bigger tanks are where full bodies go. And you do have a choice. The idea with cryonics is that you would bring back somebody with some type of modern science in 50 years, and they would be alive again. And I just visited Alcor and did a big story as part of our bus, and it was a fascinating experience. I had a great time there. Biohacking is perhaps the most important emerging field of transhumanism. I consider it something that's incredibly important. I have a chip implant in my hand right here. You can do a number of things with this chip implant. I don't have the software on my bus, but if you did, you could start your car. I've seen this done just by waving your hand. If you have a security system, you can wave your hand. I think the next generation chips are going to allow you to pay. So when you go to Starbucks, you just wave your hand and all your stuff is there. Now imagine, for example, you go to an airport and you've lost your plane ticket. Well, everything could be saved here. I'm a big believer that very soon, and the chip is the size of a grain of rice. So there's no way that you can detect it. It's a 3-second procedure. Literally, it's a needle, pop, and the chip is in there. I'm pretty big fan. I know some people are skeptical of chips. They're skeptical that the governments will use them, of course, for surveillance, and that's a battle that we're certainly going to have with implants. But I'm a believer that using this type of technology inside your body is going to be helpful in the long run for a lot of things. Which brings us to cranial implants. As I talked about with cochlear implants, there's about 120,000 people around the world that have cranial implants for a variety of reasons. Mostly they're for Alzheimer's or for depression or even for epilepsy. We're essentially stimulating the brain. When someone's having an epileptic seizure, the chip can monitor it and send back signals in an attempt to control that. And so far the studies, the few patients, well, it's not a few patients anymore, it's thousands now, have shown that it works great. There are 3 million people that have seizures in America. So figuring out a way to cure epilepsy, or at least stop epilepsy, is a big thing. And of course, we have even more people with Alzheimer's that can use this. So they're finding ways to stimulate your memory, stimulate different ways to control problems that we have in health. And brain implants is absolutely a big thing. But moving away from some of the more kind of controversial things, 3D printers, I'm a big believer that in the next 10 years, all of us will probably have at least one 3D printer in our house. And there's a lot of reasons why you want one. If you broke your oven handle, you would be able to go to Amazon and just order exactly what you want, and boom, it would print one out right there. If you haven't seen a 3D printer work at some of the conferences, they're absolutely fascinating. And probably in 2 to 3 years, they're going to start having metal 3D printers where you can start printing some amazing things. The problem with printing, 3D printing, I do want to point out, is that there are people that can print guns, and that people that can print hand grenades, and people that can print things like that. So it's not without controversy. We have a drone on our bus. We have a very small one. It's about this size. It costs $20. I advocate for a lot of drones. In fact, I think we have a lot of nonviolent people in prison that could be monitored with drone technology, and we might be able to get some of them out and just have drones follow them and save some money and put that money in education. I've written articles, some controversial articles on it, but drones have gotten so small and so cheap that you can buy literally 5 drones now for under $100. Some of them are the size of a quarter, and they can follow people around. They can also land on charging pads and charge themselves. So drones have become very I would say that drones, of any of the technologies we're looking at, drones is the one thing you're going to hear the most about in the media, maybe next to artificial intelligence, because it's so complex. It changes our vision of surveillance in the government. It also changes our vision of going to the store and getting a 6-pack of beer, if one can bring one right to you. Or in my case, I like scotch, so maybe you'll bring me a good bottle of scotch. And that's the kind of thing you can order online and have it delivered to you in 3 or 4 minutes. And of course, who hasn't heard of robots? We're having them all day long. We have a 4-foot robot on our bus, so if you look in the front window, you'll see it. It's named Jethro Knights, after my novel, and I'll get to that in a little bit. But it does 1,000 different things. If you mimic things like this, it'll do it. If you say, play karate, it'll do karate. And it's only cost $500. It's going to become the hot item this year at Christmas. If you have kids, they're going to want them. It takes about 18 hours to assemble, so if you don't have that kind of time. But it's amazing how far even very cheap robots have come these days. And I worry that truck drivers, waiters and waitresses, and many, many jobs will be replaced by robots in the future. So that is a huge topic that's coming through the pipeline, and you're going to hear about it. It's funny that we're not hearing about it more in the 2016 political campaigns, but you can rest assured that by the time 2020 comes around, truck drivers, and there's 7.5 million of them in America, will be challenged by driverless trucks. In fact, in Germany, they just had a driverless truck hit the road. So, some pretty difficult stuff, because I think every single one of us can probably be replaced by a robot for whatever job we do. It's just a matter of time. It might take 20, 30 years, but it's going to happen. And so the final concept, before I move on to the next stage of my speech, is the singularity. And so the singularity is transhumanism's kind of quasi-spiritual concept where technology starts happening so quickly that nobody even knows how to understand it or see it anymore. Well, it's a concept that, as you kind of go around thinking about it, keep it in mind, because it's when we start merging with machines, where are we actually going? Well, the singularity is that concept of we're going to a place where our human understanding can't understand, but technology keeps exponentially growing. So the singularity is a very important part in the transhumanist, I guess, lore and philosophy out there, and probably the most nebulous of all the ideas. Which brings me to how I got into transhumanism. I'm a big believer, because my number one goal with transhumanism is to live indefinitely, is that we must make a transhumanist wager, and it's kind of sort of like a Pascal's wager, except Pascal's wager was based on we should all believe in God, therefore we might get in heaven if God exists. Where the transhumanist wager says we can conquer death with science, therefore we should dedicate all our resources and energy to trying to conquer death so that we can live indefinitely. And that's what the transhumanist wager is about. Well, that's what my novel is also about a man who wants to live indefinitely. And the book did very well. If you've read it, you may think it's very controversial. Most people don't like it. My robot is named after the protagonist. But I mention it because making a transhumanist wager, perhaps everyone in this room has already done such a thing because we're here. But I'm going around the country trying to tell people about transhumanism so that they will get more into it. Because the one thing about conquering death is without more resources from the government, without more resources from public and private companies, we're not going to be able to conquer science. So we need to be able to kind of conquer death with science through the kinds of resources that people have but that are not giving. You know, one of the things I did on my tour with our friend back there, Veit, who's a journalist with us, is we visited a megachurch in Alabama. And I was amazed. The megachurch was like a university campus. And we just went there to talk to one of the pastors and look around. And they had 27,000 members. They must have had a huge amount of budget, maybe $100 million budget, I don't know, but it looked like a university campus. One of my main goals with transhumanism is to try to make transhumanism that big so that one day maybe the Church of Perpetual Life would have a giant campus where, you know, classes and students came and we could expand so that more and more resources would go into conquering death. It brings us to this question of why would we even do that? For those of you who may not know, I invented the sport of volcano boarding while working for National Geographic. It's a bit of a strange sport, but you go down volcanoes while they're exploding. And you can watch a video of it. Just type Zoltan Istvan National Geographic volcano boarding, and the National Geographic video will come up. But it brings into question what actually motivates us to live. And there's a lot of us in this room are probably motivated to live indefinitely. I think that's why we're here. And it's a very important concept because I have been trying to tell people everybody wants to live indefinitely. It's really just a question of how can we do that? Well, my own kind of conversion to transhumanism or conversion to living indefinitely came from when I was working with National Geographic in Vietnam. And I was doing a story on bomb hunters. There's this group of people in Vietnam that have given up rice farming and now dig up the unexploded American bombs, and there's millions of unexploded bombs, in the jungles. And they sell that metal. They sell that metal for money. They sell that metal for a lot more money than they can make for rice farming. But the problem is that there's landmines every single place that they dig. So it's an incredibly dangerous job. And literally, you know, in a couple years of work, you have a pretty good chance of having a leg blown off, if not dying. So, but you can make a lot of money doing it. So I had an experience where I almost stepped on a landmine. My guide tackled me and threw me out of the way, and we later digged the dirt up right around and said, look, there was a landmine, and it was. And it got me thinking, well, it's time to dedicate my life to transhumanism, because I didn't want to die before that, but after that experience, I really didn't want to die. And that's when I said, you know, I'm going to go home, start writing my columns about transhumanism, start writing a book about transhumanism, start driving a crazy bus around the country for transhumanism, and advocating for indefinite lifespans. But it all has to do with why are we here, and how can we do that? What is it that each one of us can do to make it so that we can live indefinitely? Well, that's a choice that all of us have to make. It's a transhumanist wager. And of course, as I'm going around the country talking, one of the main things I'm hearing is religious opposition or just kind of cultural opposition saying, well, we should die. Dying is a natural part of life. Dying is a holistic part of life. Well, transhumanism doesn't, in my opinion, doesn't embrace anything holistic, and nor does it embrace anything natural. There's nothing natural to a transhumanist. It's all science. It's all what can we conquer and what can we achieve. There's nothing natural in the word natural just doesn't exist in the scientific method, which is kind of the holy grail for transhumanists. It brings us to this idea of what can each one of us do in the room before I kind of move on to the next set of my slides, which is going to be a little bit more wacky, to create a transhumanist planet, which is essentially what I have been trying to do, my writers with me have been trying to do, is we're trying to get people motivated and excited about science so that eventually more money will flow into it. More money will get to the kinds of companies and the SENS and places like that need it for research. I can't say this enough. Conquering death is a matter of money. So the more excited we get people about it, the more we can create a transhumanist-minded planet. If we put our resources into science, if we put our energy into it, I promise you that within 10 years, if the planet gathered together as a whole, we could absolutely change fundamentally the landscape of medicine. I have said this many times before, the net worth of the world is somewhere between $200 and $400 trillion. If we would just spend a fraction of that, just spend $1 trillion, I believe in 10 years we'd be able to, for a huge amount of people on the planet, probably achieve an indefinite lifespan for most of them. And it's something that I would, I've been advocating for again and again. It's the field that can only do good. It's a field that only can bring joy and less suffering to people. And it's one of the reasons why I support transhumanism so much. So as you go out there today afterwards, it's just understand, living indefinitely is a money game. The more money we can bring into it, to give to the researchers, to the scientists, the more people that support it, the more people that we're going to get to support indefinite lifespans. Which brings me to kind of the next stage of my slideshow, and the final one, which is how weird can the future get? And I always like to end with something a bit more speculative. A lot of people talk about artificial intelligence, as Jane did earlier, which is wonderful because I love writing about it. I have a number of columns. I write about AI all the time. But the key to AI and the key to technology and the key to some of this wacky stuff is uploading virtual avatars, basically cranial implants that allow us to merge with machines, things of that nature. I know there's a huge amount of resistance to it right now. Even in the transhumanist community, there's a large amount of resistance. But the fact is coming that we now have headsets that are allowing us to telepathically talk with one another. Where, like for example, between France and India last year, they were able to say hello just through thoughts. The future is changing dramatically. And there are people, I have friends, biohacker friends that are now working on getting cranial implant chips because they want to commune directly with rudimentary artificial intelligence. Imagine being able to directly think into a machine's intelligence. This is what the biohacking community, part of the transhumanist community, is already doing. It brings us to this idea of what is human beings. Everyone in this room thinks you're a living flesh body, but in the future we might live in servers. There's a number of people that think we're going to, based on that technology I told you about, where you can use brainwaves, EEG technology essentially, and upload your thoughts into algorithms, into machines, and recreate yourselves. Of course, it's another form of overcoming death, and it's not the form that I actually usually advocate for. It's just a form I like to write about and talk about because it's so spacey. But the truth is, there is a time coming in 50 and maybe 100 years, maybe much less, when we will be able to probably upload ourselves, and that might be our lives inside there. In fact, I'm going to be giving in Second Life, in the Terrasum's, I think, Future of Technology of Futurist Persons thing on December 10th, as part of my bus tour, I'm going to be giving my first talk in virtual reality in Second Life. And it's the beginning. It's the beginning of this idea that we belong to another reality. It's not just a reality here. It's a reality full of many, many possibilities. Maybe we won't have 5 senses. Maybe we'll have 500 senses. The intelligence levels could be dramatically increased if we were able to combine our brain power with the brain power of artificial intelligence that at some point might be 10,000 times smarter than us. And that day is coming when a machine will be 10,000 times smarter than us. Its IQ levels will be astronomical. So we're getting to a point when it's important, and I say this again and again, that to look at ourselves differently, to not think of ourselves as biological beings just of flesh. That's what we are now. But we're changing, and over the next 20, 30 years, we're going to change very, very dramatically. And it brings up the last two slides, which is really, we can do so much with this transhumanist world. It's a brilliant place. It's a place where our children don't have to die, our parents don't have to die. It's a place where we can literally end suffering. And I'm a big advocate of space travel. For those of you who don't know, I took a very long sail trip through many oceans, and the idea of exploring the universe is something that sounds perfectly brilliant to me. It sounds like exactly a transhumanist endeavor, so we very much advocate for space travel. It also advocates for going back to money, that transhumanism in the future is going to be creating an enormous amount of new wealth. And for those of you who are entrepreneurs in this room, I can't emphasize enough, there are brand new companies, brand new ideas out there that are going to make so much money, like the internet, that we've never seen, by cyborg parts, by virtual reality, by uploading ourselves, by all sorts of incredibly unique things that we can't even think about yet because we haven't thought of them yet, but they're all coming. And it's a world that is just going to be significantly better than what we have now. I like the world right now, but I'm looking at a world that's much more utopic than we have, a world that has no suffering, and a world where we especially don't have to worry about death. In closing, I just want to say that thanks for hearing my speech. I hope you've learned something about transhumanism. And if anyone had any questions, I would also be happy to answer any as well, if there were any at all.
You know, we're going to do a microphone so everyone.
Oh,
so that's how we'll handle this.
Absolutely.
10 minutes.
Sure, sure.
I think a hand for Zoltan.
Thank you.
Questions? All right, that's great. Here we have one.
I was told that to have. Thank you. I was told when, as far as the,
Just a minute.
as far as you have a chip implant in your wrist or your hand, it's hard for me to talk. One veterinarian said you must put a chip in each one of your dogs. And then an old-fashioned veterinarian from Egypt said no, because it'll promote cancer.
Okay, so that's the...
Sure. And, you know, so I want to be honest that the studies are too new right now to say whether you're right or whether you're wrong. So we are in the process of it, of learning whether there is something that can cause cancer. So far, because there are about 30 or 40,000 pets around America that have that chip implant, the incidence of higher cancer has been negligible. However, there has been a slight increase, and that's what got people worried. But the increase was something like, there could have been so many various things that had caused that. Maybe just owners that get chips are more concerned. And so it offset the real things. So I think in human beings, not that many have had it yet. It's probably going to take another 5 years. But I can tell you that right now, the US government has gone ahead and authorized putting chip implants into its soldiers so that it'll be able to monitor them and follow them. It can do things like regulate your heartbeat, and it can do things like test your blood. It can also do things like carry all your medical information. So it seems right now that there are more benefits to that slight chance of cancer, but I want to be honest, we just don't know yet. It's going to take a few more years of testing.
Thank you. Here's another question for you, Zoltan.
Sure.
I'm concerned about what you said about no death. Okay, overpopulation. Okay, if no one's dying, where do we go?
Sure, and you know, this is the number one question I get on the road as well, and it's an awesome question. So in my advocacy of indefinite lifespans, what I like to say is I support mega geoengineering projects. You know, they talk about, for example, we're depleting the ozone layer because there's all these greenhouse gases. And I believe, you're right, I believe the planet's getting hotter, and I believe we're destroying our planet. In fact, my years for National Geographic, a lot of it was environmental. However, maybe, and the reason we're worried about the ozone layer is we're getting cancer. Maybe the way to deal with cancer is, and deal with the ozone layer, is to overcome cancer and not worry so much about the ozone layer. Because after all, outside of cancer, it's not causing that many issues. That's not an excuse, get me wrong, for saying we need to let anyone just have as many kids as they want and we're not worry about overpopulation. But I believe that we can harness the mega engineering project that would save the environment and also hopefully let people have as many children as they want. For example, one of the greatest technologies right now is meatless meat. If you don't know, 35% of the planet is dedicated to grazing. That's where forests are gone. I've been in Paraguay for National Geographic. 92% of the forests in Paraguay are gone. And for cattle, if we had meatless meat, we would be able to get back, have that many more people on the planet so that we could actually have a normal planet that's pristine and still have that many people. A lot of experts think that the planet can handle between 15 and 20 billion people if resources were distributed properly and if we've had mega geoengineering projects where we could fix some of the things we've done, like destroy forests or destroy the oceans. We just have to learn to use resources better. So I believe that we shouldn't stop and shouldn't worry about overpopulation. What we should worry about is being better stewards of the planet.
Thank you, Zoltan. And I'd like to interject that here at the church, we have spoken on this subject many times. You may be interested in going to our YouTube channel and watching some of the past presentations that address some of these items. I have another question here from Doug.
Yes, being a musician, I heard about these things in the future where you can get these implants and then your abilities to learn something would be quadrupled and you could learn violin or whatever. It just would be something in the future for that.
Yeah, in fact, you probably have read that from my Vice article. I wrote a column entirely about music because I'm a musician myself. I play the piano and I've been played guitar, and I love music. I play almost every day when I'm home. So what's happening right now is we have these headsets, and you can get them at Target. You can get them on the internet. There's about 20 companies that make these EEG headsets. They transfer brain waves into your head, and they allow you to feel certain types of things, and also think. For example, you can think a photo of taking a photo and apply it to Facebook almost instantaneously. In a few years, they think the technology is going to get into when you talk about music, you're talking about a very certain part of your brain. If you can stimulate that very certain part of that brain and you can learn how to reinterpret that stimuli, you may be able to learn more quickly how to process music. And my wife and I have this issue all the time because we're like, should we teach our 4-year-old to play the piano? And I said, well, we're probably going to be able to download Mozart's, Fifth Symphony in 18 years. It's this, should we really do it? It's sort of like the Matrix, but the reality is that technology is already coming. Now, we're not there yet, but it is coming. So it's something that I believe will happen, but it's not going to change anything immediately. But I do want to tell you something fascinating that I've been working with biohackers. I saw this recently. They have biochips that they don't go in your brain. They go on top of your skull. They go underneath your skin. And you can play your music through that chip, and it reverberates off your skull. And you have to learn to hear the music differently. Your brainwaves have to reconfigure and learn to hear that noise differently. But eventually, over a period of a couple days, it becomes music again. So there's a huge amount of new types of technologies that are out there. So for example, you might be thinking music in your head, and then you'll have a new type of music because you'll have a different kind of pathway for sounds to enter. So there's different ways to hear music. And of course, it's all in the same part of the brain, but it can come through different places than the ear. So there's the technology they're messing with is really, it's going to be very interesting for musicians here in the next 10 years.
Right. We have time after the event to be able to speak with Zoltan personally. So we're going to take 2 or 3 more questions and then wrap it up with the questions, if you will. Over here.
I've been following this for a number of years, and I understand the ramifications. I understand the sociological changes, the difference of interrelationship. Perhaps marriage would be a 50-year contract, and all the ramifications that go with it. What I'm concerned about is in this particular time of history, it's the greatest concentration of wealth ever. My concern is is the distribution of the technology to the planet, that I see it, unfortunately, being patented, controlled, limited, expensive, and not accessible to most people. I see it, a whole thing being accessible only to the very, very wealthy.
So, you know, this is the second most popular question I get asked. And the question usually is, will the elite take the resources even further, more than they have? And there's no question that inequality has been growing. The good news is that when you talk about prosperity, when you talk about kind of our lifespans improving for every human being on the planet, well, according to the World Bank, for the last 30 years, the happiness, less deaths in war zones, less, infant mortality rates, every kind of measure is going up for everyone on the planet. The problem is that inequality is still growing, and we must do something about it. So I got to be honest, without being political, as I promise not to speak about politics, we do lean to a point of trying to spread a basis for more equality. In fact, we support a universal basic income on our bus, and we spread that message saying that we think because robots are going to take all the jobs, we should try to make the wealth more spread out. Because after all, the planet belongs to all of us. And even though some have, grown more wealthy, we should make a point of, just from the humanitarian point of ourselves, sides of ourselves, spread that wealth more evenly. Now, I just want to say one thing. I'm optimistic because the new era of billionaires, the Mark Zuckerbergs, the Elon Musk, even the Bill Gates, they are not like the robber barons of the 19th century. They are more willing to spread and to use democracy, I think, to make sure that their wealth gets around. I'm hopeful that if we discover things like life extension medicines, they will share them freely. I'm hopeful that that will be something that occurs rather than this fear I get all the time of they just sort of leaving us behind, becoming these gods, and the rest of us remain sort of, in our worlds. I think because of social media, because of technology will make the world more democratic, and I'm very hopeful of that, and I'm not naive on that, because I would look back terribly in 20 years and say, wow, that didn't happen, because I do see inequality growing, but I think at some point it's going to hit a level and then roll right back the other way, and we're going to be a lot happier.
Thank you for your answer, and we have a question back here from Larry.
Curious because just like the body has a built-in obsolescence, there's also a mental factor of a death wish. So how would you work with that? Because we seem to have taken that to such a level now that the level of suicidal, homicidal mentality now is astronomical. So it would seem like first we'd have to develop a level of kindness for our lives and our fellow creatures before we go on to extending them.
Well, this idea of having a biological death wish is actually something I've thought quite a bit, because we do as a species seem to do incredibly destructive things to ourselves, and it makes no sense. I'm hopeful, though, because of maybe virtual reality, and I just wrote an article about virtual reality and infidelity. I had this strange experience when I was speaking at a conference in Toronto of putting on virtual reality glasses, and there was like a program, and I interacted with the program. She was a beautiful woman, and she started grabbing my hands, and I thought, oh my God, I'm cheating on my wife. So I all of a sudden took it off. But what I'm trying to say here is there's this possibility that we may get out some of the alligators in our heads through other types of technologies like virtual reality, where maybe in the real world we can be kinder and simpler to ourselves and better to ourselves. We might be able to find a kind of competitions or things like that where we can, I guess, imagine wars and bad things that sort of eliminate. But I'm more hopeful, that's kind of the near-term future, because I know that that's where a lot of people, at least journalists, have been writing about. I'm hopeful in the near-term future, people will be using some type of technology, like we'll have drones. If you don't know, your iPhone is probably going to fly in the next 3 to 5 years. There are companies working on smartphones that fly now. And these phones are eventually going to be so smart that they're going to say, hey, don't do that to that person, that's wrong. Or, this is the way you want to do this, and don't, buy this fruit because this fruit is better for you than the potato chips. I think technology will make it so our lives are healthier, better, and safer. And I'm hopeful that eventually it will also make us less mean and less hostile towards our fellow neighbors.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone, for answering questions and stuff.
Good job.
Thank you.
That was really something. I really appreciate you coming all the way in that Immortality Bus, aka coffin, from San Francisco, and certainly hope that you're careful as you return your trip around the loop of the country. I want to point out that we are having another service here at Perpetual Life on December the 17th, I believe. It's the third Thursday in December. We will be doing the Remembrance of the Resurrectables. The Remembrance of the Resurrectables is where we have a ceremony commemorating all the people who are currently in cryonic stasis. Also at that time, if you have a family member, you're a member of the church, and you have a family member who has passed, or if a very important person in the movement for unlimited lifespans has passed anywhere around the world and hasn't been cryosuspended, we'll also be remembering them. And that will be the third Thursday in December. You know, you hear a lot of criticism when there is an emerging technology. All emerging technologies have had their share of critics. But I'd like to quote Teddy Roosevelt on the critics. It's not the critic who counts. It's not the man who points out how the strong man has stumbled and fallen, or how the doer of deeds could have done things better. The credit belongs to the man who is actually in the arena, who has his face marred by blood and sweat and dust, who strives valiantly and who knows great enthusiasms and who spends himself in a worthy cause, who at the best knows in the end the triumph of high achievement, and who at the worst, if he fails, at least he fails while daring greatly, so that his place shall never be in those cold and timid souls who know neither victory nor defeat. We have a man that epitomizes this statement by Teddy Roosevelt, and I'd like to ask him to come up now. Let's give a welcome to our own Mr. Bill Falloon.
Thank you so much, Neil. I founded this church of Perpetual Life 2 years ago. It's when we had our opening ceremony in November 2013. The purpose is to accelerate the Creator's plan for mankind, to enable human beings to bypass nature, to accelerate technology that will result in humans merging into an environment of perpetual life, perpetual abundance. And as Zoltan stated about transhumanism, our church is all for any technology that will enable human beings to escape the confines of nature. But what I try to do for every single service is to give the congregation a take-home lesson as to how they may be able to avoid a preventable and premature disease or death. Now, most of you may have seen in the headlines in the last couple weeks that there are new guidelines for hypertension. In case you don't know what the definition of hypertension is, it is any blood pressure level high enough to cause disease. That's the definition of hypertension. Any level that's high enough to create a problem in the body that results in disability or death. The raging debate has been, well, how high is that level? What is the safe threshold that a person can confidently be at and not worry about a stroke, heart attack, kidney failure, all the vascular problems related to higher than optimal blood pressure? When we started talking about it, way back in the late 1970s, conventional medicine was allowing patients to walk out of the office with blood pressure readings as high as 160/90. And what I'm going to focus in on, though, is the high number, the systolic number, because that's the one that kills people. The systolic represents the pressure placed on the arterial system in response to each heartbeat. And the higher that systolic number, the more pressure there is on the arteries, arterioles, the capillary beds, and this creates coronary artery disease, ischemic stroke, hemorrhagic stroke. The leading cause of death out there is related to hypertension. And we were debating with doctors saying, you know, people who practice calorie restriction, their blood pressures are around 90/60. They're very low, and they're very healthy, and they live longer. But the doctors were still saying, well, the average person, normal blood pressure for non-calorie restrictors, they're up to 160. Then after that, we treat. Well, they started noticing people at 160 were having too many heart attacks, too many strokes. So they lowered the threshold, upper threshold, to 150 systolic. And they were still seeing, though, too many patients succumbing to heart attack and stroke and kidney failure. They reached a level of 140 and thought, well, that's the magic number. As long as you're not significantly above 140, then you're okay. During this entire 4-decade period, we were advocating for people to keep their blood pressure below 120 systolic. In fact, optimal blood pressure readings, we believe, are approximately 115 over 75. That's the number that virtually all of you in this room should strive to achieve. It doesn't mean you all get there, but if you can get to anywhere near below 120 over 80, you're doing yourself a tremendous favor. Well, what happened last week is at a huge cardiology conference, perhaps the biggest in the world, an announcement was made. This was a result of a 5-year study, but it was terminated in a little bit over 3 years. And the reason is that they looked at 2 different groups. One had their blood pressure aggressively lowered to approximately 120 systolic. They were trying to go below 120. That was the objective. The other group, they were trying to push their systolic down below 140. After 3 years, they started noticing something. The people who had the lower blood pressure, and their average, by the way, was 121 in the aggressively treated group compared to the one that was trying to go below 140. Theirs was 121. The average for the other group was 136. But just that small difference resulted in a 27% lower overall mortality rate. Now that's huge. Any cause of death, if you lowered your blood pressure to a target range of below 120, you had a 27% lower risk of dropping dead. But then they looked at cardiovascular death, because that's what's most normally impacted by higher than optimal blood pressure readings. The startling number for that was people who were in the higher blood pressure group, they had a 43% greater risk of dropping dead from cardiovascular disease. This is huge. 43% greater risk of the most common cause of death in modern America. Just think about that. All of these decades, when the conventional establishment was saying you can have systolic numbers of 140, 150, 160, think of how many people needlessly died. It is in the tens of millions of needless deaths that occurred because of medical ignorance. And I say medical ignorance because in the peer-reviewed published studies, it was obvious that people with lower blood pressure lived considerably longer. They had considerably fewer strokes and heart attacks and kidney failures. And yet the doctors consistently said, well, it's normal for blood pressure to be between 140 and 160 systolic. So since that's normal, we'll just let it stay there for most patients. And if it goes over 160, we'll treat it. They were wrong. They were wrong for a couple reasons, but they weren't motivated enough to look into the literature the way people like myself and Zoltan and the girls that talked. They're looking into the scientific literature. One of the girls, Polly or Jane, you put up a presentation on metformin. We've talked about that at this church now for the last 2 years. It's an anti-aging drug. And I was surprised more people didn't put their hands up, but please ask your doctor for a metformin prescription. It will extend your lifespan. But when it comes to blood pressure, you want to get that systolic number below 120. You want to do it safely, by the way. You don't want to just double the dose of your antihypertensive drug to try to make it happen immediately, but work with your doctor and do what you can to lower your blood pressure to below 120 and get your blood checked, by the way, in 2 or 3 months, because for some people, the chronic high blood pressure has created a need in their kidneys for higher blood pressure, which of course damages the kidneys, but if you acutely lower it, you can encounter some kidney damage. That's a very small percentage of the people in this study that I talked to you about, where you had these huge reductions in mortality. A higher percentage of the people in the lower blood pressure group were developing some kidney damage, and that's only because they were aggressively reduced too fast. So if you do it slow under the guidance of your doctor properly, you should be able to attain optimal blood pressure readings and not suffer this epidemic scourge of just absolute carnage related to the failure of most doctors to recognize that any blood pressure reading over 120 places you at a substantially higher risk of premature death. So that's what I wanted to communicate to this group. I have a duty to communicate, to disseminate information that I learn and translate it so that everybody, I hope, can understand that. If anyone has any general questions for me, I'll answer them. If not, I'll be around for the whole night to talk to. Yes, there are. The gentleman asked me a question about potential side effects of metformin. And there are several of them. It can block vitamin B12 absorption, which can elevate your homocysteine levels. So when you get on metformin, you want to get tested maybe every 3 to 6 months in the beginning to make sure that your kidneys and your liver are functioning well, and also make sure your homocysteine is not increasing. You may want to test your testosterone. For some people, it can lower testosterone levels. That's not good for certain men. So there are potential side effects. We've published so much material on it that the side effects should become apparent. But what we have in today's world is artificial intelligence. It's called Google. And I think most of you know what we're saying. I mean, you can type something in there and it knows what you're looking for. I mean, we've got it already. Anyone who's afraid to have an implant in their brain doesn't realize they're kind of using the artificial intelligence already. And you can type in metformin side effects. You can learn more about those side effects than what your typical busy physician might know about it. There are some gastrointestinal effects some people have. If you take it with a meal, normally that does not occur. And for some people, they cannot take metformin. There are alternatives to boost an enzyme in the cells called AMPK. You saw a little schematic of that, of how metformin increases AMPK activity. That's its primary mechanism of preventing disease, and we think extending healthy human life. If you practice vegan diet, which normally involves calorie restriction, if you practice consistent calorie restriction, you do not need metformin. If you exercise vigorously and you're under age of 60, you do not need metformin. Calorie restriction and vigorous exercise do the identical mechanism in the body. The longevity mechanism of calorie restriction is what metformin induces. I would love to preach calorie restriction to this whole group, but the fact of the matter is most people aren't going to follow it. But taking a pill a couple times a day, that's not that big of a deal. Of course, you've got to get your physician to agree with you, or you can just order it offshore and go up on Google and figure out for yourself whether or not it's safe or not. Well, you can bring them in some of the scientific literature, including this new study in which they're going to attempt to validate the longevity benefits of metformin. But what I've always done, by the way, when having a difficult time finding a prescription, is just get the phone book out. Boy, am I talking in the past. Go to Google and just type in a list of doctors in your neighborhood and simply ask the receptionist, will you prescribe metformin if I'm not a type 2 diabetic? I've never had to make more than 5 calls to get a doctor who said, sure, come in, give me some money, I'll write you a script. And I'm not talking about a scheduled drug. We're talking about Depranil, we're talking about metformin, we're talking about drugs that are safe when used properly and they're not scheduled, so the doctor can legally prescribe it off-label. What's interesting, the gentleman asked about potential side effects from antihypertensive drugs. If used properly, they can actually have side benefits. Telmisartan is the generic name of the antihypertensive that I've been recommending for the last couple years. It has side benefits. Potential side effects for someone if it drops their blood pressure too low, but it improves endothelial function. That is a huge benefit for the drug telmisartan. So what you can do is evaluate which drug class that might most comfortably fit your lifestyle. Sometimes people take beta blockers and they find that slows them down too much. Just switch to something like telmisartan and you may not even notice you're taking it, except you'll see your blood pressure going down. And I hope everyone has an at-home blood pressure monitor. It's so important, by the way, to make make sure that you're consistently keeping your blood pressure below 120. I hope everyone remembers that when they walk out of this church tonight. You want optimal blood pressure readings to be below 120, but do it in a safe way.
Thank you.
Okay, if there's no other questions, we're going to have a reception downstairs.
Actually, I have something else.
Oh, good.
If I may. Thank you, sir. So about 2 years ago, Tanya said we should have a gentleman come from Brooklyn and perform. Now, Harlem, was it? I beg your pardon. I beg your pardon. Harlem, it must be. A gentleman who is a hip-hop artist, well-renowned in his field, who has written a particular song to perform here at this church. And he's been wanting to get down, and we've been emailing back and forth and on Facebook and calling and all kinds of things. When can I do it? I'm ready to do it. He's made a special song, especially for Bill. And I'd like to introduce to you the rather famous Mr. Maitreya One.
One. Thanks, Neil. Wow. This is my. I'm really. If I wouldn't even be doing this if it wasn't for Bill Falloon and Saul Kent. I don't know if you ever would guess that somebody would make a hip hop song that's inspired by you guys, but it's happened. This is called Maitreya One, the Hip Hop State. I'm working on an album currently. I don't have a release date or anything like that, but we're working on it. It's coming out good. This is called Maitreya One, the Hip Hop State. Cure, aging the model, sipping wine out the bottle, trying to bury my sorrow. FDA is so hollow, trying to kill my tomorrows. Having visions like a scientist, feared by biolutes and deists. Maitreya One, what you represent? Super intelligence, soon to merge with artificial intelligence. Who wanna live forever? My album cover read the tombstone, died never. A hip hop, I'll be the gray who raps in bow ties. I'm trying to double my lifespan like Michael Rose did to fruit flies. Or wake up in vanilla sky, evolve or die. We in a race against time. We gotta build that time ship before we flatline. I do this for patience on standby at Alcor. Catch me off tour. Catch me off tour. Oh man, I got to catch me off tour. Hopped out the Tesla with the Falcon doors. White coats surround me. First friends behind me. This is science. This is fate. Welcome to Maitreya One, the hip hop state. I am the light of the streets. I put the reaper to sleep. Chose to be frozen instead of dropping 6 feet deep. I'm talking cryopreserved. I'm taking hip hop to a higher level, high as a bird. I am hip hop and I have returned. I'm sorry, I got too emotional. I have returned. Stem cells, the nanobots. Reverse engineer the brain and build a better robot. The logo's twin serpents. My intellect above savers born of virgins. My solid orphan. Watch this record spin in a coffin. All right. I'm too emotional. I don't want to keep your... Oh. All right. Sorry. I'm kind of tired, too. I've been on the bus for like...
Maitreya has been... Maitreya One is on the Immortality Bus touring the country. He, I guess, joined in Atlanta or Alabama there. And he was very emotional and has been wanting to do this for 2 years. I'm so glad you were able to do it, Maitreya One. Thank you very much. Our new chef downstairs is about ready for us. We have a traditional... Well, nothing in Perpetual Life is quite so traditional, but you'll find a beautiful Thanksgiving celebration, and we'll be able to ask questions of the speakers this evening and have one-on-one dialogue, and we have some lovely food and drinks there, both alcoholic and non-alcoholic drinks, so as you like it, it's all there for you. So thanks for coming to Perpetual Life, and we hope to see you some more. Good night.
It's called Forever Young. called Forever Young. May the good Lord be with you down every road you roam. And may sunshine and happiness surround you when you're far from home. And may you grow to be proud, dignified and true. And do unto others as you'd have done to you. Be courageous and be brave, and in my heart you'll always stay. Forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young. May good fortune be with you, may your guiding light be strong. Build a stairway to heaven with a prince or a vagabond. And may you never love in vain, and in my heart you will remain. Forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young. Forever young. And when you finally fly away, I'll be hoping that I served you well. For all the wisdom of a lifetime, no one can ever tell. But whatever road you choose, I'm right behind you, win or lose. Forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young, forever young. Thank you, everybody. Woohoo! That's our theme song here at Church of Perpetual Life. Yay! Let me hear it. Amen! Life is happening in the moment. Love and light to you. Know that all is as it should be. Love and light to you. Love and light to you. Love and light is true. Love and light to you. Love and light to you. Now I enter into stillness. Love and light to you. From the center comes the goodness. Love and light to you. Love and light to you. Love and light is true. Love and light to you. inside is true. Love and light to you. Feel the inspiration, move into co-creation. This insight is true. Love and light to you. It's about the journey, not the destination. Love and light to you. It's about the joy and the celebration. Love and light to you. Love and light to you.